Morning, Damian Hinds. It's good to see. I can see you've brought your file with you. You mean business?
I always carry a file.
I'm impressed. So, lots to talk about. I'm keen to explore this two-state solution, though. First of all, we've heard from the Israeli ambassador, not for the first time, talking to Sky News, saying that it's never, ever, ever going to happen. We've also heard from the then Foreign Secretary, now the Home Secretary, that that is the way forward. What's your opinion?
It's a long-standing position that we must move towards a two-state solution. I think the entire international community wants to see progress on that.
And what if Israel doesn't?
Well, that's what we think. You know, for lasting peace in the Middle East, that is important. Right now, of course, it's really important that Israel is able to defend itself. It must be able to remove the capability of Hamas to attack it. We need the hostages to be free. But we also, of course, everybody wants to be working towards a lasting, permanent stability.
How do we convince Israel, who seems vehemently against it at the moment, that that is the only way forward? Why is it the only way forward?
Well, of course.
Why is it the only way forward?
Of course, people are in talks the whole time, diplomatic talks the whole time. Britain and others close partners with Israel. And this has been a long-standing position. Yeah,
but she's saying this out loud, so she's obviously, you know, the representative of the Israeli government here in the United Kingdom. Does the Israeli government need to be convinced otherwise?
Well, Kay, I don't know what more I can add to what I just said. It's a long-standing position of the UK government that we need to work towards a two-state solution. But right now, it's very important that Israel can defend itself, is able to take away Hamas's capability to be attacking. We need these hostages to be freed.
Minister, what's your view on our mate Gary Lineker?
I always thought he was an outstanding goal scorer.
OK. What about his comments about your government?
So Gary Lineker,
was, by the way, an outstanding goal scorer. You're right.
Yeah, he was. Gary Lineker takes to social media a great deal. I'm not a huge fan of social media aspects of it in general. Myself, I'm not sure it's the best place to be having political discourse. I'm not sure it always lends itself to decent balance. Gary Lineker is entirely entitled to his views, but I think everybody who is directly or indirectly in receipt of effectively a privileged position, I mean, everybody has to be mindful of how they use that.
But is it appropriate that your colleagues like Grant Shapps get into spats with people like Gary Lineker?
Look, I was just saying, I'm not always the greatest fan of how parts of social media work, but that is what happens, Kay, on social media. People do get into one-to-ones, and that then gets more amplification from the platforms, and it attracts more people into it, and it creates these points of interest.
OK, so it's probably better not to engage, is what you're saying.
No, I didn't say that either. Look, we all engage where there is public discourse going on, but I think it's also really important to have polite and balanced and respectful engagement, and you don't always see that on big parts of social media.
That certainly is very true, Minister. I, for one, can attest to that. Talk to me about, let's go on brief for you. You'll be pleased. RAC, what's the update on the schools as far as this dodgy concrete is concerned?
Yeah, so look, it's been a difficult time for schools who've been affected by this. There's about 221 schools with RAC identified. To put in context, about 21,500 schools altogether. So it's a relatively small part of the estate. And within that, of course, there are some schools where it's a small part of the school. In others, it's been more of a broader issue. In some schools, affected quite significantly. For them in particular, it's been difficult. 99% of the schools with RAC identified do now have full-time face-to-face education going on. Not always in ideal circumstances, of course. Sometimes you've got your children in school halls, for example. We are committed to funding the capital that's needed to remedy RAC. In some cases, that will mean rebuilds. In other cases, it's more about refurbishments. And we're also covering all reasonable revenue costs to do with the disruption that's happening in the meantime.
And so how long is it going to take to fix?
Well, it depends, of course, in different locations, you've got different degrees of issue. In some, it's a case of managing the issue. And, if you're talking about the rebuild of a school, that's obviously a much bigger proposition.
I know in that file you've got details of a new back.
How do you know?
If you open it, I bet that's what it says, doesn't it?
Well, OK, yes, I do.
OK.
I'm glad you asked me about that. So the Advanced British Standard, this is a long-term reform. It's a bold breakthrough to break down the barriers between academic and vocational education, to make sure all young people are studying maths and English of some sort, in some way, up to the age of 18, but also a broader range of things being studied, which is better for, broadens career options, but also broadens mind horizons, and means that when you increase one subject, it doesn't come at the expense of another. And then more time overall, more time in taught time in college to accommodate all of that. It's a reform for the long term. It doesn't happen overnight. In fact, sort of today's year ones will be the ones who are, eventually sitting the Advanced British Standard.
Why does it take so long?
But you get the benefit. The benefits start now. So we're already putting more resourcing in, £600 million down payment, we call it, over the next couple of years, to building up capacity on maths and in colleges and so on. It takes so long because you've got to do this collaboratively, and you've got to do it very carefully, and you've got to build up. You can't just overnight say we're suddenly studying all these other subjects or all this extra time. You need to have the teachers in place, you need to have the capacity in place, and all the other kind of infrastructure that goes with it.
OK. It would be remiss of me if I didn't ask you before I let you go whether planes will ever take off for Rwanda.
They will.
When?
I can't tell you that, but I can tell
Why
you.
not?
I can tell you why. Come on, Kay. I can tell you that we are working very hard to do that. This piece of legislation that's now before Parliament, I think, is the toughest possible piece of legislation on this imaginable. We've got a strong partnership with Rwanda, and there is every reason to believe that absolutely it's going to happen.
It's tearing your party apart at the moment.
It is not.
Really?
I think a lot of people in the media thought it might tear our party apart, but everybody in the parliamentary party that I know wants this to work. Look, we're a broad party,
You
and of
can't
course,
agree
look,
on how it should work.
Look, we've
That's
got
the problem
we've got
for
a
you.
position, we've got a proposition. The government has a policy, so yes, there is debate about it. Go and ask the opposition what their policy is, what their position is. They haven't got one. They keep saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and it turns out X, Y, and Z are things we're already doing. They haven't got the policy on the deterrent.
What's really interesting is that every minister that sat there has said, Labour have not got an answer. In other words, you're trying to deflect me. Bright, shiny thing over there is not going to deflect me. I want to know what you guys are going to do about it, because you have different views, and it's never,
to be fair,
never going to take off.
you asked me about what my party was doing, what our position was, and where we disagreed. I answered all of that, and then said...
I didn't ask you about the opposition. You brought it up.
I'm a politician. I then pointed out, which I don't think is unreasonable, in politics is about the art of the possible. It's about a choice between realistic alternatives. We've got one. We've got a policy, and we're putting it into practice. The opposition, who are saying,
Here we go again.
But they won't. What they won't say is, here's our positive alternative. And the only things they do say, they're things we're doing already.
OK. It's great to see you.
It's nice to see you.
Have a fantastic Christmas. Thank you for joining us.
Happy Christmas.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. First time I've said that this year so far. Thank you.